So, welcome everyone. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today, we're going to be talking about the role of men and the role of women. And what's interesting about this topic is that the role of women and the role of men are different when you're relating men to men or women to women. What men respect in a man is not always what women respect in a woman, and vice versa. The other thing we're going to be discussing is, I think what's obvious to all of us, is that it's Kali Yuga and gender roles are very mixed there. We don't live in a traditional society. And because we don't live in a traditional society, some men are forced to, I wouldn't say forced to, but some men have been raised in a more feminine way. And some women have been raised in a more masculine way. Maybe the boy didn't have a father, or the father wasn't a good example, or somehow or other has a nature to be irresponsible or weak, or the woman had to fend for herself. She didn't have a father, or she had a lot of younger siblings and she had to take care of them. Her mother was weak or alcoholic or something. So sometimes by circumstance we're forced to take on roles which are not traditional, which is part of the problem of not being in a traditional society. So we're going to read these things and we're going to discuss these things. And before we begin, I wanted to start with reading something that Prabhupada had said. These are not the Prabhupada said, but these are things that Prabhupada asks his disciples to say when they're married, and it gives us a basic starting point for where we're at and what the traditional roles of male and female are, general roles. So I'm going to read this to you. Let me put this on my lap. So this is a wedding ceremony. So Prabhupada tells the husband to say, I accept Prabhavati as my wife and I will protect her. Prabhupada, yes, that is the helper in Krishna. I will protect her and I will help her in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada says, the whole idea is that women require protection. They are very innocent, weaker sex. They should not be given freedom. No, that is not. Very dangerous. Just like a child cannot be given freedom, it is dangerous. If I give one freedom, all right, you cross the road, that means his life is at risk. Similarly, women, they're weaker sex. Of course, this is controversial. I'm going to explain this, what Prabhupada means here. But for now, let me just read it and then we'll discuss it later. Okay? Artificially, don't try to become one with man. That is not possible. Better to remain protected by man. In the childhood, a girl is protected by the father. In youth, protected by the husband. And in old age, protected by the elderly sons. This is the 3 stages of women. There is no 4th stage. So this system, husband taking charge of the young girl, husband and wife in Krishna consciousness. It's very nice. Introduce this, everyone will be happy. There will be no unhappiness. So I am very glad that Harinam, a Krishna conscious boy, is taking charge of you. And you also promise, quote, and this is what Prabhupada wants her to tell the husband, I promise to serve Harinam for my whole life. So the man is saying, I promise to protect you and help you in Krishna consciousness. The woman is saying, I promise my whole life to serve you. There's no question of separation. Oh, the husband is a little poor, I'm giving him up. No question. In any condition of life, you should remain together. Even if you have to live underneath a tree, don't be separated, you'll be happy. Even if you live underneath a tree, don't be separated, you will be happy. Okay, that's interesting, isn't it? You will be happy under a tree. Wow. Prabhupada, now you say, my dear such and such, I agree to serve you throughout my life. That's to the woman, Satyabhama. So this is, I guess there's more than one couple being married. Paramananda, I agree to serve you throughout my life. Prabhupada, and you say, my dear such and such, I take your charge of life throughout without hesitation. Paramananda says, my dear Satyabhama, I take your charge of life throughout without hesitation. Prabhupada, so no separation in any circumstance. Promise that, no separation. So there's no separation. So now this, of course, controversial point about what Prabhupada's saying. It's not really controversial, but if you lived in a traditional society, this wouldn't even rattle your brain at all. It wouldn't surprise you or make you think, wait a minute, they're treating women like children. But if you look at society today, it's obvious that women are exploited. And one thing you women know, that men are very lusty. And men are wired to be lusty. I was just watching a show last night about marriage and about the nature of man, and the person doing the show was very candid, and he said, of course, we can't apply this to all devotees because devotees are different, but this is general. He said, men are always ready to have sex. They're always waiting to have sex. If the woman allows that, they'll do it. If there's a way to get in, he will get in. That's his nature. He's wired that way. So when we say women need protection, what do they need protection from? Well, primarily from lustful men who can't control themselves, which are many men, given the chance or opportunity or situation. So women are protected from that. What's the protection? Well, first protection is the father. He doesn't allow men in his daughter's life who could potentially exploit them. And then the husband protects the wife materially and spiritually, provides for her, and by being a good husband, she's satisfied and she will not be interested in other men, so that's a kind of protection, and he protects her from other men being aggressive because he's with her. And thirdly, the sons. So when Prabhupada says women are like children, obviously it's misunderstood by many of us, but it means they're prone to be exploited, and sometimes the exploitation is seen to be love, seen as love rather than what it is, exploitation. Yeah. So that's one of the things it means, or the basic idea that it means. And there are other aspects of exploitation in a male-dominated society. If women aren't careful, men will take advantage of them in other ways, especially at the auto repair shop. You have to be careful. If they know you're a woman and they figure, not they know you're a woman, they know you're a woman, they figure you don't know anything about cars. If they're not honest, they can say things that maybe a man would understand. No, the way the car's running, it couldn't be that problem. I mean, they do this with men also sometimes, but they may take advantage. There's some studies like this. If you go to buy a new car, they'll give a little higher price to certain ethnic groups. So now in an ideal society, which women are being protected, they don't have a need, unless it's genetic, but they don't have a social need to be male, because the males are doing their duty, which is to take care of them, protect them, provide, be in charge, and so forth. And you may say, well, do all women like that? Well, it's their nature. Maybe they don't like it now because they don't trust men, or they don't see men that can do that. But by nature, they like that. They like to be taken care of. They like to be supported. Men by nature like to protect. It's a natural situation. Men by nature like to protect. Women by nature like to be protected. I'm supposed to record this. Now I have to go back and repeat what I said because it wasn't recording it. Hare Krishna. The tower in Soho, we spent time together. Hare Krishna. Mr. Greg Porter. It's been documented that if women are in the military and the men and women are fighting together, the men actually can't do their job so well because their nature is to protect the women. So if a woman is injured or needs help, then the men, they naturally gravitate towards protecting them to the point where they become a little bit dysfunctional as a soldier. It's natural. It's just men have this nature to protect women. They also have a nature to exploit women, impure men. So if you take the pure male, what is a pure male? The pure male is a protector. He naturally wants to protect a woman. And the pure female, what's the pure female? She naturally is happy when she's protected. She doesn't naturally want to run the show. She doesn't naturally want to be the provider. Now you may say a lot of women have educations, they like to work and so forth. It's a little different topic than they like to work because they like to work. And maybe income is needed, it's necessary. But if it's still, they want the man, to be the boss, to run the show, to do the male things. And men like a woman who is, generally men like a woman who is not like a man, who is not bossy, is not taking charge, but is happy to let him take charge. So I was saying in the beginning that what is a man for a woman and a woman for a man is different than what may be a man for a man. So I think we should best focus on a man for a woman and a woman for a man. What that means is because most of us are married or will be married, or trying to stay married, or either not married and getting married. We are either married and trying to stay married, or married and trying to have a better marriage. So it's essential to understand the nature of the person you're married to and what makes them tick and what they want. And before I continue, there was a nice statement Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami said. When we're talking about male protection of female, we also have to discuss the nature of male, as we were just discussing the nature of male. The sexual nature of male is to exploit sexually a woman. He's wired, even if he doesn't want to. Sometimes, if she's attractive to him, he will naturally think about that, and if there's an opportunity, he will do it. So male protection of woman means not to exploit, but protect, and especially the husband. Protect the woman or the father or the children or the brothers, to protect the woman from sexual predators, which potentially all men are, or most men are, if given the opportunity and the particular situation they're in. And so we find about 50% of men, maybe more, 60%, cheat on their wives. We find many men in high places have been found to have illicit relationships. So unfortunately, we have a society which is not, how do we say it? We have a society in which male and female mix so closely together that it aggravates the male tendency. So in Vedic society, men were allowed to marry more than one wife because Prabhupada said that their sexual tendencies are very strong and sometimes they can't be satisfied with one woman. In our society, it's not allowed, and it may not work in our society even if it were allowed. And so men have to control themselves. They only have one wife, and it's difficult, seen by the fact that most men cheat on their wives. So Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami said that I am trying to teach the men, or I am trying to help protect the women from the men who are supposed to protect them by training the men, because if the men aren't trained, they don't do a good job in protecting, but they'll tend to exploit. So, as I said, man has a nature to protect, but he also has a nature to exploit sexually and dominate and control if he's not trained. So, in the marriage, we read those quotes from marriage, and Prabhupada is telling the man, I will take care of you, I will protect you, I will support you in Krishna consciousness. That is the pure male. That is the man who takes charge. I will ensure that my wife and children are Krishna conscious. I will ensure that materially they're protected as well as spiritually. I will take care of their needs. I will not be weak. I will be controlled. I will not cheat on my wife. This is the pure male in relationship to the woman. This is what the woman wants. And to the degree that's lacking, she will lose faith in him. She will start to take control and even start to adopt male qualities, which in general are unnatural for most women. Now, some women have a male nature from birth. It's biologically they're male, but that's more of an exception. A woman may be listening to this and you might say, well, I have a male nature, but you may have a male nature, as I said earlier, due to circumstances where there wasn't a male in your life and you had to take a male role. Well, like, let's say your husband leaves you and you're there with one son. You have to be a little male to take care of the son, and you have to be the husband and the wife. Or you didn't have a father growing up. There was a lack of a father figure. Or your mother was weak. And you had sometimes daughters and sons end up being the mothers for their mothers because their mothers are weak, or their mothers have an addiction, or they have a mental problem. And so circumstantially, we're forced to take on male qualities. Or a woman lives alone. She never married. She doesn't have men in her life, and so she's fending for herself. Or she's working in the corporate world where you have to be very, it's a male world, so you have to be very male to function in that world. And in traditional society, men and women were separated, and men and women were not jealous of one another. Men and women were not competing with one another because they had defined roles, and the female roles could not be done well by the men, the male roles could not be done well by the women. What's happening in our society is when the men don't fulfill the male roles, then the women have to become more men. Or they lose faith in men and they don't trust their man to fulfill all the male roles. So then they start to be forced to take the male role. And that may have happened from early on in life. And that may be a survival mechanism. It may be practical and useful and valuable in a particular situation. But generally, a strong man won't like that. Only a weak man would like that. And so if you're a female dominant, you want to marry a man, if that's the kind of man you want, who allows you to be female dominant and kind of control everything, and he's okay with that. But many, many men who are men would not be okay with that, and it would create conflict because he wants to be the man. He doesn't want you to be the man. He wants you to be the woman. And men, by nature, as Prabhupada says in the Bhagavatam, they don't like to be criticized by women. They don't like to be bossed around by women. They like women that support them, that help them, just as women like men who support and help them. So the male ego it's bigger, it's strong, it's more dominant. It doesn't like to be secondary. But there are some men, maybe, who grew up without a good male role model, and they don't mind a woman who dominates. Now, I'm not making a judgment about that, because in my opinion, if it works in a marriage, if the wife is happy and the father is happy, then it's good. The only problem is it may set a bad example for the children, because the children will tend to be like their mother and father. So if the wife is very bossy and the husband is not, generally the wife, the girl will be that way when she becomes a wife, and the boy will be a little docile if that's how his father was. Or if he had no father, he didn't have good, or older men in his life to set an example of what it means. Now, to be a man. Now, another thing we find that's often lacking on the male side is they don't want to take responsibility, and they're slow to get married, and once they get married, they know that now the fun's over, so to speak. So a lot of men would prefer to be a little more free, the idea of being married and tied down. For some men, they don't like that, and so they can't commit. And so they get in a situation where it's looking good and they have a good relationship. Sometimes they'll be very slow to commit. Bigger problem is once they so-called commit, they don't take the responsibility to be a husband, because there's this tendency to be irresponsible. And because responsibility means you have to do things you don't like and you have to undergo some austerities. So they may not like doing that, so they just don't do it. So that's a problem. So women, like men who are responsible, relationships are based on trust. They want to be able to trust their man that he's chaste to her. They want to be able to trust him that he will provide for her. Women need this financial security. It's very important to them. They want a man who can provide sufficiently. They don't want to marry a man who will leave them on the street someday. Of course, Prabhupada said in Vedic culture, the women aren't so much like that because they'll stay with a man no matter what. But security is one of the 6 human needs, and so many women will be extremely concerned about marrying a man who they don't think can provide, and obviously concerned about a man who's not able to control himself in the presence of other women. A lot of times you'll see a woman very concerned about a man's behavior with other women if he's a little too loose or maybe flirty. It's very disturbing. So, you might think, well, that's a sign of a man. He's, is very romantic and flirty with women. It's not. At least not when he's married. In our society, we don't understand this so well, but if you just go back a little bit, and if you go to religious people, then once a man is married, he doesn't really have close relationships with any other women. And a lot of men don't understand that. They think, well, these women were my friends before I was married. But the thing is, now you're married, and so it will make your wife generally uneasy if you are spending a little time with a woman or just talking to her or communicating on social media, what to speak of being with her. And it's awkward unless she's your sister or aunt or some cousin or something. So that's something in traditional society, it just didn't happen. And why didn't it happen? Because Shastra says that even a man has knowledge, and even though he's advanced spiritually, the nature of the male, or you could say the nature of the male hormonally, biologically, and also in terms of the conditioning of the consciousness, is that he's wired in a way that he can't even trust himself to be alone with another woman. And so there's where Shastra says you shouldn't be alone with a woman. All right, what if you're working in an office and you're working on a project and it's you and a woman? It's not ideal. Nothing's going to happen. You're in an office, people are around. I mean, it would be rare. Usually nothing happens unless you're isolated. But the general principle is that we don't trust ourselves because we're not pure. And even if we have no history of any of these incidents, still we try to be cautious as far as is practically possible. And so if you're married and you have connection with a member of the opposite sex, it should be minimized as far as you have control over it, because it's unhealthy for the marriage. The other partner generally will not appreciate it. And so being married, being a man, means being chaste to one woman. Being a wife means being chaste to one man. And so that's what your husband expects, and that's what your wife expects. As soon as you're loose with another man, or a man's loose with another woman, it creates a disturbance. And we know, according to Krishna consciousness, the real man, the man who is strong, the real strong man, is the man who's sense controlled. That's the definition of a strong man. He's controlled. And so what is the main sense control for a man? It's sexual, because that's the most difficult to control. And that's the thing that will disturb the relationship with his wife or his fiancé the most. Now, ladies, you have to be a little kind on men and understand that in our culture, men are not raised necessarily to be men. The distinctions are less clear now. And also men, you have to understand the same for women, because we're raised in a co-ed society. Men and women are educated the same, they do the same things. In so many ways, they're becoming more the same, the clothes, the hairstyles. You see a lot of women are more male, a lot of men are more female. And the men also are raised with sexual stimulants, things which would be considered indecent 50, 60, 70 years ago, for which women would be given citations. They'd have to appear in court for what they did or the way they dressed. Now it's normal. And so, some women think, well, it doesn't matter how I dress, the men should just be controlled, especially if they're devotees. Yeah, that's true. I agree with that. But should and whether they are two different things. Should, yes, but are they? Not always. Can you expect it? Not always. Don't test it. Don't agitate it. That's why it is said women should dress in a chaste way. So women will say, well, what does it matter, if the men just have to, keep their eyes off of me. Yeah, well, dress in a way that they keep their eyes off of you. Or at least off of the things that they can't see what they would want to see. That's how women should dress. So you should understand that. So don't expect that men are all saints, because men are biologically wired to be physically attracted to women. And given the opportunity and the circumstance, it's very difficult for men to control themselves, which is why it is recommended never be alone with a woman, and don't be in environments where you would be disturbed or agitated. That's the idea. So women need to understand that as well as men. And that's what it means to be a man, to take charge of his marriage and live his life in a way, in relation to other women, to make sure that his marriage is not at all being corrupted by any kind of attraction or association with other women. Because men, like Prabhupada said, or Shastra says, butter and fire, men can't withhold themselves in certain situations. And women should not expect it. And as women, the way men look at you, that men are, in our society, have never really been trained, unless they've been raised in a very religious environment, they've never been trained how to properly respect women. And when men are looking at you, they're looking at you in terms of being a sex object. And they're not looking at you thinking, oh, she's so beautiful, and you feel your self-esteem shoots up because they think you're beautiful. Beautiful for a man means good for sex. And so women should understand that. And so when we say we want to protect women, we want to protect them from those men who could exploit them. And when we say women are like children, it means easily exploited. And I've seen this many, many, many times, where women can't distinguish between a man's desire to exploit her and a man's desire, or a man's show of affection. She misunderstands that often it's not affection, it's just sexual desire. And therefore some protection from that is necessary by men who are either her father, brothers, and sons, whatever, who can help her understand this. So, now, I was talking earlier about man's man and woman's man, and there's a difference. Because women are looking for things in a man that a women want, and men are looking for things in a friend, a male friend, that men want, and women are looking for things in a woman friend that women want. And they're not always the same. What men appreciate in other men may be a little, for lack of a better word, I can't think of a better word now, but I'll use the word obnoxious. They may be obnoxious for a woman, where a man is like, just rough and tough, and that may be the way men like it with other men. And not all men, but some men, and rough and tough. And, if there's some kind of problem and a man steps up to the plate ready to fight, the other men will respect that. This guy's tough. He didn't back down. He stood up and And he took care of the other guy. Women may not all appreciate that. It may upset them. It may make them think that he has this tendency. He got very angry. I don't know if I can trust him. Maybe he would act that way towards me. Maybe he's got violent tendencies. The men won't think that way. The men's not going to think, oh, my friend just beat this other guy up because he was harassing someone. The men's not going to think, oh, maybe he's going to beat me up. For most men, that would be respected. Oh, he's a tough guy. I respect that. That's very male. So that's a man's man. But what a woman wants in a man may be much different. And there may be other things that you can kind of think about this and think, what as a man do I like in another man? But I shouldn't assume that a woman would like that. And what do I like in another woman? I shouldn't assume that men, what am I trying to say? I shouldn't assume that that's what men would like in another woman just because I like it. And the other thing is, I shouldn't assume that a man can give me everything that a woman can give me. That women have friends. Females can give them something that men can't give, and vice versa. And men can give companionship in a way that women can't, because we understand one another. We're the same sex, and you understand one another as female. You're the same sex. So there's certain things men don't understand or can't relate to, and in a woman, and women can't relate to in a man. But women and women can relate, and men can relate. So in our society, we see that it's difficult, and men have to understand this. It's difficult for women to be this ideal, just go along with everything, submissive wife. Now, at the same time, most women want to be, but they don't have husbands and they don't have a social support structure that makes it easy to do this or enables them to do this. They have a man who maybe isn't strong enough, or maybe makes bad decisions, or they feel they need to advise or control a lot because he's not that together. And so that causes her to be a little more dominant, even if it's not the female nature and she doesn't want to be. So, man, you have to understand, if in any way you see your partner, your wife dominant, it may not be because she's dominant, it may be because you're weak in some area and she's filling in and she needs your help, or she wants you to step up to the plate and be a man in this area. It may be that she has a dominant nature, but as I said before, most women don't have a dominant nature. It's socially acquired as a mechanism, a survival mechanism for many, many women, and being raised in a culture where there's not these strong gender distinctions, and then often when you get married, you want stronger gender distinctions, and they're not there because we weren't raised to be strong men, and you weren't raised to be that very female, submissive, go along with women. You didn't see that. You didn't see your mother doing that. I saw my mother argue with my father all the time and try to, push him around. It was that's just how they did it. And he was always frustrated with it. He didn't like it. He'd go along with it, but he'd always get angry when she did that. And so, those are my role models. And my father never spoke to me about what it means to be a man. I was very irresponsible when I was young. But I did well in school, so he was happy. I was getting good grades, and that seemed to be all he cared about. So he never talked to me. He never showed me, this is how you deal with women. This is what they want. This is what it means to be responsible. This is how I would define a man. This is what a relationship is about. I got zero. So that, women look at men and say, well, are there any good men? And they find so few good men, but the men think the same way. Well, where are the good women? This is, none of us were trained what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. So if you want to enter a relationship, you should understand that the woman wants you to be a man, the man wants you to be a woman. And therefore, you need to start becoming that, or first understanding what that means, what the expectations are. You can even ask your partner, well, what do you expect? As a man, what do you expect me to be? Or the man can say, as a woman, what do you expect of me? What do you like? What don't you like? What would disturb you? What would support you? Now, if you read Prabhupada's books, you read these very, very clear kind of black and white descriptions. This is male, this is female. And we look at that and we say, well, where are those males and where are those females? And we don't find a lot. But it doesn't mean that that's not what a male is, and it's not something we can strive for. At the same time, the partners have to understand that it could be very unnatural, like for a woman to be super submissive and, whatever husband does, she says, yeah, I'll just go along with it. What if he's doing something bad or wrong? She can't go along with it. And what if she was never trained that way? Her mother was always very domineering. It's going to be hard for her. So we have to understand that, and to expect these ideal black and white male-female roles. I don't think it's realistic. You can try for it if that's what you want. But what I would suggest is you don't force it on your spouse, but if you're a man, understand what it means to be a man. If you're a woman, understand what it means to be a woman. Understand what a man wants from you. Men understand what a woman wants from you. And then try to be that to the best of your ability, and to the degree you can't be that because you weren't trained that way, it's not in your DNA, and you just tell your spouse, I'm trying my best, but and I'm a work in progress, but this is, who I am right now, and that's important. The problem that I've seen is not just in male-female, but in anything in Krishna consciousness. When you get this ideal, okay, this is what it's supposed to look like, then that's when all the judgment comes in. Well, you're not like that, or self-judgment, I'm not like that. And so we rather have to see these things as ideals to strive for, and understand that in some cases, some of these ideals, we're going to fall short. But if we're sincere devotees, that's more important. So I may not be the perfect husband, the perfect wife, the perfect temple president, the perfect this, the perfect ideal example in every area. But if I'm a sincere devotee, I have tried my best to follow Srila Prabhupada. I'm trying to serve Krishna and my Guru with as much devotion as I can muster up. Then we have to give leeway, because of our imperfections, that these ideals that we would hope devotees and husbands and wives to be, and children and so forth, we may never get to that absolute platform because we weren't trained from childhood to do that. And that, I think, is an obvious reality. I was talking to one devotee, very learned devotee, and we're talking about female role models and ideal male role models, traditional. And I was saying, and so we were discussing, well, this is the ideal female, husband abuses her, but she's submissive and goes along, and that way tries, hopefully, to purify him by seeing her good example, as Prabhupada gave. The example of his sister did that with her husband, who was a drunkard but stayed with him. And I said, well, what percentage of women today do you think can do this? And he lives in India, and he said, maybe 1%. I said something like 1 or 3%, which was about 1 to 3% higher than what I thought. I'm sure they're out there. Okay, 1 to 3%. We'll agree with that. They're out there. But because less and less women are trained this way, and less men are trained to be good husbands, it creates a problem. Now, you want a wife to be more traditional. So you as a husband, you have to be more ideal as a husband, more of a protector, caregiver, controlled, provider, responsible, etc. Then it makes it easier for her to be submissive, because she knows, well, you're smart and you're taking care of everything. But if you're not so smart and you're not taking care of everything, then she's going to look at you and think, well, I have to fend for myself, or I have to point out when you're making a mistake. And so these things have to be taken into consideration. Otherwise, what happens for many people, when they become devotees, they become fanatics, because they read something, this is how it is, this is absolute, and they start judging everybody based on that standard. Well, you're a disciple of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said this. Or you're a senior devotee, and Prabhupada says, yes, but I don't see you acting this way. Yes, because we're works in progress, that's why. Yes, because we were trained in another way. Yes, because we were never conditioned to think that way. And it's very, very difficult if you've been conditioned to think against the way that Shastra teaches and you become a devotee when you're 20 or 30 and then change that conditioning. That's difficult. If you're trained when you're 5 years old to think that way, it's much different. So we have to understand that reality that so many devotees are coming, and then there's this whole new paradigm they're supposed to fit into, and they never grew up with that paradigm. And it's like, kind of like twisting your head backwards. Okay, I have to twist my head the other way. This is about as far as I can go. That's about it. I can go a little farther. Okay, I can go 45 degrees. No, 50, 60. But I can't even go, maybe I can go, no, that's 90 degrees, right? I go about 130. That's about it. I can't become something that I was raised not to be. I can become a little of that. I can try my best. A few devotees are better at doing this than others. They're more attracted to those traditional roles, maybe bringing it over from another life. Some devotees have a harder time. Some devotees completely adopt it, or almost completely adopt it. So we should understand and be sympathetic both to ourselves and others who can't be ideal, at least not immediately, or perhaps ever ideal, and then not judge them based on that. Oh, you should be this way, and if you're not this way, there's something wrong with you. Okay, I know how I should be. You know how you should be. Every woman knows how she should be. It's clear. It's in the Shastra. But can you be that way? Well, not exactly. Not always. Yeah, samskaras, as Gora is saying. My obeisances, Gora Prabhu, ki jai. We have these samskaras. And so we have to be sensitive to other people's samskaras, because those samskaras exist. And what can we do? They're just there. And so I've often said, in any relationship you have, if it's based on judging the other person because they're not what the Shastra says they should be, well, that's an excellent way to ruin the relationship. Actually, it's one of the top 4 ways to ruin a relationship, and it will ruin it. And if you don't divorce, you'll just live in a ruined relationship. Because love doesn't judge. Love is accepting. So you have an ideal for this person, but you married them, and you should have been smart enough to know that what you got when you married may not be any different 50 years later. It may be just that. That's as far as they could get in terms of the social conditioning they have. They can't undo it. And to judge another based on these high standards in Shastra, it's destructive to a marriage. I'm not saying we shouldn't try to achieve them. That's not my point. But I'm saying even if we try to achieve them, it may not be possible for all of us to even get close, although these are standards which we respect. These are traditional roles. Now, roles. The other thing which is so interesting, if you go back in society, you will see that this is how people lived. They had different roles. Women were much different. Men were much different. Men tended to be stronger, more responsible. Women tended to be more chaste. That was a culture. And so what's so interesting about Krishna consciousness is if you go back to more traditional cultures, even a few hundred years in the West, or perhaps anywhere in the world, you'll see that people, even who are not Hindus or in Varnashram, but just religious people, which most people were 100, 200 years ago, you'll see that their lifestyle, their values were very similar to what we find in the Bhagavatam in regards to the duties and responsibilities of the men and women and so forth, because those traditional societies were more natural, and all the Bhagavatam is explaining is what's natural for a man and what's natural for a woman. And so it's so interesting that although we're devotees, socially and due to our conditioning, we're much different and much further away from traditional Vedic than people a few hundred years and before that were, in general. Of course, I'm not a historian, but from what I understand, from what I see, from what I know of history, when religion is on the decline, materialistic values confronted, and then these traditional roles get conflated and merged, and whereas traditionally the roles were much different. So it was easier for men to be men and women to be women because the roles were clear. And as you know, divorce was non-existent. Of course, you couldn't get divorced. That may have contributed something to it, but it wasn't such a culturally acceptable. It wasn't. People were more religious, and religions asked their congregations to not get divorced. So that's an interesting phenomenon that, socially speaking, even though we're devotees, many of us are, by standards of society a few hundred years ago, we're pretty out of it, honestly. We're pretty degraded, although we're devotees. So this is what we're dealing with. And so we need to understand these social norms so that we can at least try to be more in line with them, because that's really what's natural. And we're raised in a very unnatural environment, all of us, or most of us. So that, in trying to become Krishna conscious, we're also dealing with this whole other aspect of our lives, from the social aspect. We don't, most men don't know what it means to be a man. And most women don't know what it means to be a woman. Where are the role models? Where's the traditional roles? Yeah. So I'm going to take your questions because I've gone like 45 minutes. And interesting discussion, isn't it? Okay, so let's go back and see where they all started from. So I think the first one is Krishna Karshini. I think we women have to be very understanding of our husbands because they're often not able to fulfill all our needs, although they're doing their best. Yeah, because for whatever reason, they may not even be able to understand all your needs. You may have never even told them all your needs. Maybe you told them all your needs and there's no way they can fulfill them, or they don't have a desire to fulfill them. And also we've talked about this. You also have to understand that when a man lived as a brahmachari, there's a mentality he may have developed that is not ideally conducive to grihastha life, or ideally conducive to fully respecting women as mother. Okay, that's an understatement. You know what I'm saying. So there may be vestiges, traces of those samskaras within the heart of brahmacharis, where they were taught in some ways to disrespect women as a means to detach, or to see women as the enemy, or to see women as more materially attached, more emotional, weaker spiritually, and so forth, which would then cause them to disrespect women to some degree, even though they're married to them. So that's something to consider. And it's not their fault. Many men were programmed that way in the brahmachari ashram. It's somebody's fault, probably the person in charge of the temple. We have to, as we say in America, the buck stops there. Leadership, GBC, everybody, in some ways responsible. And we're still responsible today if that's going on, if we're allowing that to happen. So, but it's a reality, and it's happened to many men. And they came out, as Gauradas said, scarred with some scars. Not some scars, many scars. Some scars is putting it lightly. You've got many scars. And I personally got many scars as a brahmachari, but we somehow or other didn't know how to adjust the fact that women may have frailties that men don't have, or some weaknesses that men don't have. At the same time, see their strength and respect them for their nature to serve and be submissive and so on. We don't know how to combine those. We were unbalanced in that way. And as men, with our egos, we wanted to feel better or stronger. It made us feel insecure to think women were better than us. And all this all this came to us through our misunderstanding of Shastra and preaching from those who misunderstood Shastra in this regard. And so we were damaged. I think many men in ISKCON were damaged. I can't say that they're being damaged today. I don't have information, but I would suspect in some places the damage is still going on to some degree. And what that damage amounts to is lack of respect to women, demeaning them, and then when you disrespect and demean them and you marry them, then you disrespect and demean them as you feel validated to do so when you're married. And I think many men who lived in ashrams can attest to this to one degree or another. Katie says, we also need to think of how far we would allow the man to go with not fulfilling our needs, and which needs are we willing to either give up or amend. Yeah, of course, if your need is to have 3 Rolls Royces, yeah. But we're talking about needs which are important to you as a woman so that you can be balanced and satisfied and happy, so that you can happily execute your Krishna consciousness. We're not talking about excessive needs, we're talking about natural needs. And everyone's needs will be different. But the fact that I have certain needs that I must fulfill, and that if I don't fulfill will cause problems in my Krishna consciousness, is something I have to acknowledge. And maybe in the future those needs will change. But if I have those needs now, then I have them now. And I have to express them, that this is what I need. Well, it might be something simple. I just need a space to be alone, or I need some quiet time without being disturbed. That's a valid need for a man, or a woman's need. We need to be together more, spend more time. So those things. Excessive needs, yeah. Excessive needs are always problematic. They will always create problems because it's difficult to fulfill people's needs if they're excessive. And if they're excessive, it means that there's something lacking in the person that they're unable to fulfill themselves, and that it should be something they look at. So Gurudas says we're bringing a lot of negative samskaras, yet we can't help it. How about the idea to see your husband as guru? Is he guru? There's a problem that exists everywhere in the world, and probably always existed, but especially now, of persons in authority misusing their position and exploiting those under them. In preparation for this class, I was Googling sexual abuse in the military, and most of the sexual abuse, or a lot of it, is done by people above you. And we're talking about, it's crazy in the military. They have male commanders for women platoons. What do you expect? So those commanders are raping or propositioning women. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of cases that don't get resolved. And sometimes the women are told, don't say anything. It's going to be difficult for you. So, so seeing your husband as guru, yes, if he is. But giving him, and then what does he think that means? Because guru means I'm servant, but in the polluted mind of a man, it means you do whatever I say, whenever I say it, however I say it. That's not what is meant by husband as guru. Guru is servant. Guru actually puts himself below his disciples. The guru appreciates his disciples. So when a man says, I'm your guru, generally he's not thinking like that. But if the man thinks, I should be my wife's guru, which means I should serve her, I should protect her, I should help her in Krishna consciousness, that's good. But if he says, I'm your guru, do anything I say, that's not good. That's not what is meant by that. And so anyone in a position of authority has a responsibility to serve, not to exploit. Because when you're in a position of authority, it's very easy to exploit. Because the person under you is to some degree duty-bound to do what you say. So military, I think, is a very good example of this. Thousands of women have been exploited, or tens of thousands of women every year. I believe it's every year. And that's just what's reported. And why do they do it? They'll do it if they can get away with it. That's the thing. So you have to be careful about that idea. A scar is a wound. I think it comes from some scar. Can we heal our scars in marriage? Yeah, you can get new samskars. And then that will erase the old ones. Yeah, you have to develop proper samskars. So like in any relationship, if it's not working, you're doing something wrong. If it's working, you're doing something right. So, the natural tendency is, no, it's my husband's fault or my wife's fault. That may be true to some degree. But you have to think, what can you do to make it better? And have you done anything that's been a catalyst for their actions? Are their actions responses to what you've done? You have to think of all these things. Very helpful, very necessary. Krishna Karshani says, let me go back. Most people, when they're entering into a relationship, see that a partner is not perfect in some areas. But they think, in a naive way, that they will change in some time. In most cases, they don't. It is hold on a second, I have trouble reading this. But in most cases they don't change. It seems that acceptance in marriage is the best policy. We're often very much conditioned in Vedic marriage. For us, it's impossible to achieve. This is very common, that partners think they will change the other partners. I think I read that women think they will change their husbands, and husbands think their wives will just naturally change. So some good advice for those of you who are getting married, who or just got married, is don't get married with this. If you don't like the way the person is, and it's a problem for you, don't marry them, because the chances of them changing are, you don't know if they'll ever change. They may or they may not. And even they change, you don't know how they're going to change. They may change in ways that are not the way you wanted them to. So if you're going to marry somebody and you see deficiencies, faults, and so on, and you hope that that's going to change or get better, there's no guarantee, and you shouldn't hope for that. You just have to accept it. And your other point, acceptance is the best policy, yes. And we're often very much conditioned, and Vedic marriage for us is impossible. Yeah, ideal Vedic marriage it's rare. And to expect it from your partner, it can be extremely problematic. That's for sure. So that's very important to understand what your partner is capable of doing. Like I said earlier, reading Shastra sometimes becomes a problem, because then it creates an expectation. Or you just feel guilty that you can't be that way. And I wouldn't feel guilty. I would understand that, okay, this is how I should be. This is ideal. This is what we're striving for. Let me do my best. And hopefully my partner will also see things in the same way. Follow up to my earlier comment. Sometimes the men aren't willing to fulfill even the basic needs, such as house rent being paid on time, food being in the fridge, and just really the simplest necessities. Why would you marry a man like that? Because I love him. Yeah, all right. I'm going to marry a man who is totally irresponsible because he's such a nice guy. How many times have I heard that? Once is too many, and I've heard it many, many times. This is why women need help in choosing a husband. Right? But I love him and he loves me. Oh, great. You'll be sleeping on the street in a few weeks. That's where your love got you. So, you think Prabhupada would be happy with a man who doesn't provide for his wife? Of course not. That's irresponsible. That was my point, that men have to know what it means to be a man, and women have to know what it means to be a man. So at least when you choose a partner, choose someone who at least is in many ways a man, maybe not perfectly, but sufficiently a man. Because if it's not sufficiently a man, you as a woman will be frustrated. And if she's not sufficiently a woman, you as a man will be frustrated. Oh yeah, but he's got big muscles and blue eyes, so I'll overlook the fact that he doesn't have a job, and he's lazy, and he sits on the couch and watches television and eats potato chips. But his big muscles will make up for all that. Well, 20 years he's not going to have big muscles, so then what do you do? So that's the problem. I like being with him, I feel good with him. What about all the other stuff that's going to undo all the good feelings? That you have to look at. And that's why women, when you're looking for a man, try to find a man who's a man. Men, when you're looking for a woman, try to find a woman who's a woman. Don't find a man who's like, I don't know, I can't decide, I'm not sure, what I'm going to do with my life. Yeah, maybe I want kids, maybe I don't, maybe we'll live here, maybe. It doesn't work. Men, you have to be, decide, this is what, these are my values, these are my beliefs, these are my goals, this is what I want. You need to be really clear, working on yourself, improving yourself, and so forth. Some men, devotees, are programmed to the point that they are blaming women they married to be guilty of their fall down, meaning getting married. Oh, if you were never born, I would have never gotten married. I think I'm getting an allergy attack here because my eyes are itching, and that's the first sign of allergy. And it's allergy season, and I did so good for the last few days. And now, oh no, you remember from last year, sneezing, running nose, classes, it's all the summer here. And then my office just turned around. I usually face that way. I'm facing the other way, because we have lights here, because this has become a bit of a studio. Some insider information here. It's scary that still getting, it's not marry. Marry is happy. Married. M-A-R-R-I-E-D. That's married. It's considered a fall down. Well, I would consider marriage a fall down if you're just marrying for sex, and you're marrying because you're physically attracted, and that's the only thing you're interested in. And, oh, Prabhu, I can't control myself, so I have to get married. And that's the only reason you're getting married, is because you can't control yourself. Well, that's a reason, that's a sign that you need to be married, but it's a whole package. So if that's the only reason you're getting married, yeah, then it would be a fall down, because you're not controlling yourself. It's supposed to be a fall up. You're supposed to rise in love, not fall in love. There was some disciple of Prabhupada who asked if the wife should follow everything he says because he was her husband, and Prabhupada answered, you should be so arrogant. Exactly. Husband is guru. The guru is arrogant? No. Our husband's arrogant? They are sometimes. When I joined the Radha Traveling Sankirtan, this was very prevalent. I guess the brahmachari idea. The mood was that it was shameful for a brahmachari to marry. It was not a healthy mentality to bring into marriage. You give up the camaraderie of the men, and they all think you're like weak, and so forth. To be with someone who tells you that you must change but shows no inclination to improve. Each thinks the onus is on the other. Yeah, I was told my heart and brain were disconnected. I did not know what it meant to connect them. Well, women's heart and brain are connected all the time. Men's are, one or the other is connected. Yeah, sometimes we don't know how to connect. That's true. Anyway, I think I think a lot of these problems are because we don't know what to expect, and we're not trained, and we have wrong expectations and crazy ideas. And Annalise asks, if we have a bad relationship with our father, how can it affect our partner relationship? Well, if you've lost, it could be, I can't say for you, but it could be you don't trust men. It could be you had to be more male because your father wasn't present. It could be low self-esteem, or you never got the love of your father. Now you're going to depend on your husband to give you all the, give you that 30 years of love you never got from your father. I think if you look at what you didn't get from your father and think, am I hankering for that from my husband? You can start to understand. I mean, of course, it's natural. Everybody wants affection and appreciation. And I'm not saying that a husband shouldn't give or is not supposed to give. But if your expectation is to make up for 20, 30 years of what you didn't get and expect your husband to give you that, that's not realistic. And that could create a problem in your relationship. Okay. Does that make sense? I don't know all the details. I think you have to think more about how your relationship would affect you. Those are some ideas of how a bad relationship with a father would affect, or how he treated your mother. Maybe you saw that and think, well, that's how women are treated, so you would accept that kind of treatment, perhaps. Or the opposite, if a man treats you like, if your father didn't treat your mother well and a man treats you like that, you become very violent or angry because you saw how much your mother suffered. All these things have effects. Our past, if you ever, people go to movies and they say, well, this movie had such an amazing effect on my life. Isn't it? It changed me. This one scene changed me, or the whole story changed me. So what about our own life? Our own life's a big movie. Doesn't it affect us? Of course. What are we seeing in the movie? We're seeing my parents acting in a certain way, people acting in a certain way. Does that make impressions? Of course it does. So you can meditate on the movie you saw and the experiences you had with your father and how you think that affects you now. And then if you see some problem, then you want to figure out how to heal that, because otherwise it'll come up in relationships. And you often think it's another person's fault when in fact it's your fault. Or you're creating, initializing a response from the other person. Krishna Karshani says, is it not that messed up people attracting a messed up partner? It seems that if we are all together, if we are together, we attract a good partner. Yeah, that does happen. I can't say 100% of the time, but I mean, if you're extremely emotionally ill and someone's attracted to you, what does that say about the person who's attracted to you? It says either they've got dominant problems and they see you as a victim and they can dominate you, or it means maybe they have the same problem and they're attracted to you because they think, you guys would make a good couple because you're both depressed, so you understand one another. Or you have low self-esteem and it's like a magnet to attract someone who wants to take advantage of that. Yeah, these things happen. I can't say 100% of the time, but you have to be aware of it. They happen. Sometimes we're magnets for attracting people who have, because we don't respect ourselves. I mean, this happens a lot. When you don't respect yourself, other people tend not to respect you, and you tend to attract people who will not respect you, and then you get upset for people not respecting you when you don't even respect yourself. And how do you expect other people to accept you if you don't accept yourself? I mean, it's kind of obvious when you think about it. And so, relationships are complicated when you put people together who are not psychologically healthy. And the thing I've seen, and from teaching forgiveness, is that and studying psychology, is that when we're not healthy, we have unhealthy expectations, which are reflections of past experiences of lack, or perhaps experiences of getting a lot. Now we expect, because we've always had something, we expect to be treated a certain way. And this happens with millennials when they go in the corporate world. They're pretty much spoiled growing up. They get trophies for getting in last place, and praise for last place, and then they go to the corporate world. You're not going to get praise for being in last place. So they have a hard time adjusting, and they expect to get that because they always got it, or they never got it. People are raised in abusive situations where they're always put down. And so now they're deficient, as I said, they've gone 20 years deficient with being properly loved and appreciated, and then, it's like you haven't drank any water in the last 3 days and you're in the desert. You need a lot of water, and you're not going to get a lot of water from the desert, number one, and now you need more water than normal. So now you're in this relationship and you have this need for something you didn't get enough of, or somehow or other you got enough of it, but for you it's not enough, and so you're always draining the person in this relationship to give you more of it, and they can't. It's not normal. They can give you some, they can give you a few cups of water, but to give you 10 gallons of water every hour, they can't do that. And so people make the mistake of thinking, if I go into a relationship, it's going to heal me. You have to heal yourself. Then the relationship is healing, because then it's dynamic and you grow. But if you're starting underground and thinking the relationship's going to get you above ground, it may never happen. And it's not intelligent to think that way. It's always intelligent to think, let me heal myself, and then I can contribute to a healthy relationship. Dysfunctional people can't contribute to healthy relationships. And if you continually are in relationships that are unhealthy, and you're blaming it on the other person, I would think more their reaction is a reaction to how you dealt with them. So maybe you see, every relation I get into, people react the same way, and so all women are the same or all men are the same. Maybe it's just that they're reacting to you, and they are reacting to you in the same way, and you haven't seen that, or you've seen it, but you haven't healed yourself. So then it becomes a problem. What was I talking about? Why did I say that? Messed up people attract messed up people. Yeah, I haven't seen emotionally immature people have emotionally mature relationships. How does that work? It's like saying, I haven't seen poor people live like rich people. Yeah, I think it's obvious. So if you're emotionally immature, you can't control your emotions. You have this strong desire to control, obsessive desire to control, to manipulate, and so on. Then you have to find a person who's willing to be manipulated. But if you find a person who's willing to be manipulated, they're probably damaged on some level. And how is that going to make for a good relationship? It doesn't. And statistics prove that most people are not really mature enough to be married. They don't know enough. They don't know how to, or flexible enough as well. Our spouse may try to commit suicide, expecting you to be that father that they loved but who died. We are not trained to know how to deal with suicide. Yeah. I don't know if you're speaking from experience or you have a friend. Yeah. So when you enter a relationship with an emotionally unhealthy person who never had a father, who's lacking something, then they take it out on you and expect you to be the father and the husband and whatever. It's unhealthy. Or a man who expects his wife to be a mother rather than him being a husband. Doesn't always work well, unless the woman wants to be a mother, and some women want to be. And another interesting thing, I know so many women who have this, I don't know why they have it, where it came from, but they have this mother mentality. They feel sorry for men, and they're attracted to men who are weak, who have addictions or, can't control themselves. They marry those men to help those men, and they always end up frustrated. But some women have that mood. It's like, I'm the mother, I'll help this guy, he's a poor guy. Okay, in some cases it might work. That mood that's the kind of husband they want. But in most cases it doesn't work, because ultimately a woman wants a man who's strong. she doesn't want another son for a husband. So it works both ways. So heal yourself, understand what it means to be a man, understand what it means to be a woman, understand what it means to be a husband, understand what it means to be a wife. And then we can create stable families, which are the basis of a stable society, because in stable families you get stable kids who then can create stable families who then get stable kids, and then you have a disciplined succession of stability. What we have in society today is quite a crazy situation of very unstable marriages. And I know personally from dealing with hundreds and hundreds of devotees every month practically, how many problems devotees are facing because of unstable parents, unstable social structure. So, yeah. Does that make sense? So we can continue this discussion tomorrow. Well, we have another comment. I am speaking from experience. My father died when I was 5. I didn't know what a father was. I didn't know that when you marry, you have to be a father to your wife. Well, to some degree, a father, at least a husband, or what that means. But she wants when you marry, she wants a father to the children. She wants you to be a father at least to the children. So you have to be a father. And if you weren't raised with a father, yeah. You weren't raised with a father. I was raised with a father who was kind of like distant. So, I mean, maybe my situation wasn't as bad, but it was bad. And I realized later in life, there's so many things that I don't know about being a man and being a husband and a father. I have to learn. So I started reading books and going to workshops, basically because I wasn't raised in a way that I was fully integrated or fully rounded, and I had to round myself off. And when I realized that, that's what I did. And I think I'm better for it. And, you know, people say, but you get everything in Krishna consciousness. Yeah, everything's spiritual. But you know, we would hope and expect that in our upbringing we would get everything material, but we don't. And so sometimes you have to, you know, give yourself, you learn what's not there in Shastra. Just maybe you could say it's there in Shastra, but maybe not so obvious or so detailed. How to deal with a spouse from a different culture. Understand the culture, understand why they do things. Explain to them that your culture is different, that you don't always appreciate what they do. They should learn to appreciate your culture. Another solution is don't marry a person from another culture. That's what my wife would say. She doesn't have a lot of faith in marriages with people that are from 2 different cultures. Can work. It does work in many cases. But it's harder. The more there is in common, the easier it is. So if you're already married, then I would say, yeah, you have to discuss the cultural differences. Well, in our culture, this is how we do it. This is what it means. In your culture, when you do this, it means something else. So when I do it, understand this is what it means. So I don't mean to be disrespectful. That's just how we do it in our culture. We just yell. In our culture, we yell. That's how we talk. We yell. Okay, well, in my culture, we whisper. That's how we talk. Well, now we understand that when I whisper, I'm not a sissy, and when you yell, you're not aggressive. It's just how we do it. Have to talk. Communication is so important. You have to be able to talk. If you can't talk with somebody openly, if you can't be vulnerable, if you can't hear without judgment, if they can't hear without judgment, you're not going to have a relationship, because a relationship is based on trust. If there's judgment, forget it. It doesn't work. Okay, so let's go and we'll continue this important discussion tomorrow. And why, let me end with this, why I think this is important is because I'm seeing something which you're all seeing. We don't have enough good men to be husbands, and now so many women are coming to Krishna consciousness. And there's a lot of divorce, which is really bad for the kids. And there's a lot of environments which are toxic in the family, which may be even worse for the kids than divorce. Because a lot of parents say, well, I don't want to divorce because of the kids. Yeah, but your environment at home is killing the kids. It's better to get them away from that environment. And I've seen this. And sometimes after the divorce, the kids are better because they hated their father, the way he treated their mother. And the environment was always full of yelling and beating and so forth. So it's not just about having a good relationship, it's about creating a society of healthy individuals. And when you have kids, it's your responsibility to have healthy kids who can be productive members materially and spiritually for our society and society in general. So it's your obligation to become healthy as an individual materially and spiritually so you can contribute to the future of the world. Otherwise, it's just like Arjuna said, Varna Shankar, you have all these kids who are unwanted, they're not taken care of. You know, you think the kids of gangs are wanted? I don't think so. You think all these guys in jail were wanted and loved and cared for and well instructed and educated? I don't think so. So, you know, look at the writing on the wall. This is what we're dealing with. So we have to create a better situation. And we're responsible for raising children who will be stable materially and spiritually. Okay, Goridas, last statement. Your wife may not allow you to be a father. She can't take full control of the child and interfere in a father's relationship with one's child. Gora, speaking from experience. One may say this is a control freak, but they actually maybe a sign of insecurity. Yeah, but the point is that you should understand these things before you get married. Of course, a lot of us don't understand this. But we should see these signs of, you know, if this person is psychologically unhealthy and, you know, so on and so forth. Then, you know, red flags, red flags, red flags. You want to marry a person who's psychologically healthy. Okay? So now, we're actually going to end the class right now. We're just kidding. No, you can come in. It's okay. We're ending class. I had to move this a little. No, come in. Whatever you like. Hare Krishna. So we're ending class now, and we'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same station.